Welcome everyone to this week's Real Talk Food Safety with Jill and Tia and our special guest, Dr. John Butts.
Yes, we are super excited about this week because of our special guest. But we're also happy to see you all, right? And know who's out there listening to us. So if you are listening and watching and excited about today's show, put an emoji. Put an emoji in the chat and let us know and comment. Where are you listening and watching us from?
Yes, we always do the weather check, don't we? That seems to be something that's common across like whatever location we're in. And finally in Minnesota, it's feeling a little like spring.
Ooh,
But we have a
really?
blizzard on the horizon. It's forecasted to start later today and tomorrow.
So is there snow still on the ground?
Oh, lots. We still have lots of snow.
Lots of snow. Of course. Why not ask that question? I already knew the answer to that question, right? And it's a beautiful day today. I look out my windows. It's a beautiful day in Baltimore.
Mm. And John, you're in the Midwest with us, right?
Yeah, I'm in Chicago and there's sunshine outside, which is great. Snow's gone.
Snow is gone.
Yeah.
Hey.
We're not quite there yet, but we're getting there. So
getting there.
We're getting there.
You guys are like the first to get the snow and the last to see it melt.
We are, and we love it. We have nothing. We have hardly anything poisonous up here. So
that's true. That's true.
Well, as people are joining, I hope you're joining because when you saw that John Butts was going to be with us, we're talking about sanitation today.
Yes.
Not just sanitation, but like seek and destroy and this intersection with leadership as well. Yes. Because no matter how great your environmental monitoring programs are or your sanitation, it all comes down to strong leadership as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And we love these conversations because, that's what we do here at Catalyst. Like we really are that intersection between technical skills and those leadership people skills. And, if you're joining us for the first time here, I'm Tia, this is Jill, and we are live every single Wednesday at noon Eastern time to talk to you about what's happening in food safety. And sometimes we have a wonderful guest, which we have today, which we'll introduce shortly. But we created Catalyst because we talk a lot about the technical side, but really not that interaction or that intersection of technical and leadership. And so what we do at Catalyst is we help food and beverage companies improve their food safety outcomes in their food safety culture, right? By empowering their technical experts to become technical leaders. And we do this through our crafted coaching-based leadership programs. And we've created them because we've been in your shoes, right? Like we've worked in the facilities and we worked at corporate and we worked for a large manufacturing. We worked for small startup companies. And we know that there is really a need for technical people to learn something different, do something different, right? When they step into those leadership skills or into those leadership roles.
Absolutely. And I always like to plug one of the things that I love about it is that because it's coaching based, it's not just like, how do you have effective communication or how do you resolve conflict better? But really our goal is like whole person well-being. Mm-hmm. And so we really focus a lot on self-awareness and how that influences your leadership, which of course impacts how we perform from a technical standpoint as well and within our organization.
Mm-hmm. Especially as we step into leadership roles, whether we are managing others or indirectly managing others, right? As soon as we need to step into those leadership roles from an organization standpoint, you must have those people skills to be successful.
Yes. Well, we are excited. And so even though we're going to talk about leadership as we go forward, we're also going to talk a lot about sanitation programs. So welcome Chelsea and Reagan and Tim, and I know Tim here in Minnesota with me. So
yes,
and our member from Florida, we're glad and grateful to have you with us today.
Yes, thank you for joining.
Yes, but we know we're here to talk more about sanitation. So let's jump in because it's an honor to have Dr. John Butts with us here today. And if you know anything about John, he's a legend in the industry. And I would say, Johnny, it'd be great if you would even clarify this. But when I think of you, I do think of seek and destroy method.
Yeah.
And just knowing you were at Land of Frost for decades. but there might be people in the audience who aren't as familiar with you. So would you tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe how you came to the food industry and a little bit about your career here?
Oh, thank you, ladies. Number one, I want to congratulate those of you on International Women's Day. In my career, I've certainly seen a shift, and it's really, really neat to have the leadership exhibited as we see from the women in our profession. They have helped me greatly throughout the years.
Thank
Oh
you.
yeah, I I did my BS and Masters at Kansas State University. Then I got my PhD at Purdue in 1974. That means I'm probably older than dirt. I I joined Land of Frost as I finished my PhD, and I officially retired from Land of Frost in 2021. So I
Mm,
didn't have a lot of movement. I stayed with the company, and I stayed there simply because I was continually challenged.
Hmm.
The support by the ownership of the company made addressing the challenges fun. I didn't have to work a day in my life, it didn't seem like. So, as part of my succession plan at Land of Frost, I started my company, Food Safety by Design, in 2010. And I have thoroughly enjoyed working with a diverse group of companies I had as clients in my consulting business.
nice.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love the way you even talk about Lander Frost and really having the opportunities there, right? Like, and you felt like you didn't work a day in your life, right? Like, I love hearing that because that's so important, especially as we even start thinking about food safety culture, right? You felt like you were challenged. You felt like that the things that you found that needed to be improved on, or your team found that needed to be improved on, that leadership supported you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I certainly wouldn't say old as dirt. I would say wise and experienced, which is why we're so glad that you're sharing some of the nuggets of what you've learned over these years with us today in our audience.
Yeah.
You
Well, we would
know,
love to hear like what led you to the food industry.
well, I I was a second semester senior, really in the physiology area when I discovered food science, and that was at Kansas State. So I got married, and my wife needed to finish her degree at K State in elementary education. So I started a master's program, and one of the first classes was under Dr. Don Croft. It was meat science. And we weren't in that class very long until I knew what my career path was going to be. And I've held that steady ever since. It was just a phenomenal connection that I was able to make. I often tell the story that I had 2 semesters of statistics and graduate level statistics, but it was in the meat science class when I learned what a standard deviation really was. Yeah,
Mhm.
it was fun. But the other thing is, uh, once I got there, life was fun, but we saw Listeria emerging in the late 80s.
Mhm.
It was clear that our sliced lunch meats, Land of Frost, the third largest producer of sliced lunch meats in the country, um, we were vulnerable. And
Yeah.
I was really, really fortunate to have Bruce Tompkin and Russ Flowers as mentors. Um, we were able to continuously improve our control processes until the late 90s when the Bill Maher Sara Lee outbreak occurred.
Mhm.
And it was clear to Paul Van Akron, the owner of our company, that Land of Frost could not survive such an event.
Mhm.
So I was given a clear challenge to implement a process that would prevent our products from being involved in an outbreak. So that was what got me to where I'm at today.
Mm.
Yeah.
So was that kind of the roots and the beginnings of Seek and Destroy? Or can you share with us kind of how did Seek and Destroy come to be?
Well, again, in the late 80s, we formed a team called the Shelf Life Improvement Team, SLI. Heaven forbid that we ever use the word listeria out loud that anyone could hear. And this team met early in the morning on Tuesdays, which we had to include sanitation. And they did their thing. And the team developed an investigation procedure as to how to find harborage sites and growth niches and equipment. And that we called Seek and Destroy. So in 92, we renamed the team from Shelf Life Improvement to the Seek and Destroy team. And I think that helped them, when they went out in the plant, they were on a mission. And it was truly a team effort. And we actually had maintenance and production leading the team up until the late 90s more than food safety or quality did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I think about this team of Seek and Destroy, first of all, I love it that you changed the name, right? Because that just gets everyone in the mindset of why we're here, right? And the importance of it. And then like as people are listening, right, and maybe they're deciding between like, how do I do my EMP program? The Seek and Destroy method really came from something that was really bad, right? And something where the organization was saying, we can't allow this to happen again. How do we make sure that this does not happen again? And something that has been successful, right, because we continue to use it in the industry today, is go out and find. And once you find, destroy it.
Yeah. That's right. So it's a journey. It isn't a single point in time. It's a journey that really leads a company to the plant to a high level of control.
Yeah.
So even around that, so I know we'll kind of dive into some technical parts, but I think when people talk about pathogen programs, there's always this belief, like if you're not finding positives, you're not sampling hard enough. What's your take on that? How do you see that?
Well, the key question is, where are these positives you're wanting to find, Jill? We certainly don't want to find them on a product or a contact surface. That means we have a serious problem.
Right.
So positive samples in your routine monitoring program indicate that your pathogen control is simply not working.
Right. Yeah.
That's very true.
Yeah. When we think about going out, seeking, and finding, right? I feel like people can wrap their mind around the destroy piece, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously, we find it, we destroy it. But the fact that I'm going to go out and try to find it could seem a little uncomfortable, right? For maybe not even us in food safety and quality, right? But maybe our operations team or even our finance team, right? On like, well, why would we spend the money, right, to do all the swabbing and try to find something in our environment when, it's not really right here in this little circle, or we haven't found it in our finished product or whatever it happens to be. And so I'm curious about how can positives signify even a success in your program?
Well, that's interesting because as a consultant, I get to see a lot of plants. And when we were doing our AMI Listeria workshop, which started in 2000, we worked with virtually every company in the meat business. And, management, I don't want any positives, zero.
Right.
Well, we know how to not find positives. So that mindset can really cause problems in a company, because if we're rewarded on not finding something, then we're not going to find it. So our expectation and dilemma as food safety professionals is really centered around that. How do we create a positive situation and finding problems? So simply, an effective sampling program will yield positive results. Pathogen negative environment is the goal. We also know that Listeria is ubiquitous, Salmonella is ubiquitous. Changing conditions can reintroduce the pathogens.
Yeah.
So will your sampling plan detect these changes? So we have to examine some sampling programs to see how that works. So we're really in the business of creating and managing measurement systems. We must understand, though, the behavior effects of our measurement systems. We are truly in the behavior creation process.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
process thinking also must be applied when designing these EMPs. So let's look at a typical environmental monitoring program. Now, as I go through this, I want each of you out there to kind of mentally say, is this how we do it? So let's start out. You have a list of sites in zone 2 and 3. Sites are randomly selected. Some sites are sampled weekly, some monthly. Positive results initiate intensified sanitation, followed by for cause investigation. Then we're going to verify by getting 3 or 4 negatives in a row. There is some infrequent investigation sampling outside the above program. Positive results initiate intensified sanitation, followed by for cause investigation and 3 verifications in a row. Product and zone 1 sampling are done with extreme caution. Now, that's more for the FDA folks because USDA folks have been doing product in zone 1 for many, many years.
Yeah.
So if that's what you're doing, then almost all of the sampling that you're doing is designed to verify control. So this is really what we call a verification monitoring program, where we find the organism in motion as it's being transferred from a harborage site to the product. Those are the sites we're sampling. So this routine program verifies the effectiveness of the sanitation process control program we have in place. Now, this includes sampling of product, zone 1, 2, and 3 environmental sites during operation in the RTE area. And this is the program that we use for regulatory compliance. It's part of USDA's establishment's HACCP or SSOP program, and for FDA plants measures the effectiveness of preventive controls. So when we look at this, the effect of verification-driven control, we have a contact surface positive, a product positive, or a verification site positive. That means we've had a food system failure. We have to reassess our HACCP plan. Is that a win-win?
Yeah. Some of the things that you said around, you're monitoring your environment, right? And one thing that you said a little early on is that as things change, right, your verification, your monitoring should be able to catch if there's a change in your environment and now you've introduced a harborage area or have been brought, right, Listeria or Salmonella into your facility. And so making sure that you have the sampling plan that's able to catch as things change is so important.
Yeah. And John, I find it really interesting as you talk about, the difference even between the regulatory agencies, which probably could be, it's an entire another show about maybe where they're at and their perspectives on sampling or maturity and those approaches. But it sounds like they would all kind of come back. Like if you were using seek and destroy, there would be some really common parts that you would use regardless of your regulatory authority, because it would be, right, we're doing food safety regardless of who's watching us. So even when you think about the seek and destroy process, are there some like common terms or steps that are really critical to the program that people should know?
Yeah, first of all, we have to create a situation where positives can be a success. So there we identify and define indicator sites that are early warning predictors of the loss of control. Here we're sampling for success. So this journey leads us to linkage of sanitary design to sampling. Here are the keys of that. We do a visual assessment and not for cause investigation. And these become the drivers of process control indicator sites. Growth niches and harborage sites are typically found where there are sanitary design problems. Sampling those directly or close as possible to their location is an example of where to locate an indicator site.
Mm-hmm.
Process control indicator sites then are not located in pathways of movement. This is very critical. We want to identify the problem before the organism reaches a pathway of movement. So, a simple example to differentiate a process control indicator site from a verification site is, let's look at a curved floor wall juncture that's showing signs of seepage. Sample the seepage at the juncture. This is a process control indicator site.
Yeah.
The juncture, in all likelihood, is not in a pathway of movement. Normally, close by, there is a pathway of movement where vectors such as people, equipment, and materials are moved. A sampling site in the pathway of movement then is a verification site. So this is how we can link sanitary design, sampling, and use indicator sites as opposed to verification sites in pathogen monitoring programs to provide insight to microbiological control. Now, it's important to recognize and understand the movement of the organism in relationship to the surface being sampled.
Mm-hmm.
Many positive sites found during monitoring are not growth niches or harborage sites. They're what we call transfer points.
Yeah.
A product handler's gloved hands, a floor sample in a high traffic area. So transfer points are not growth niches because the organism is eliminated during the cleaning and sanitation process.
Yeah. I have a question about that. And I'm sure, and if you have a question out there, please add it to the comments because we can see your comments. Hey, Neil. And we will make sure that we ask them to Dr. John. But when we think about, I love that comment that you're saying around sampling at the harborage spot versus like at a transfer point, right? In your experience, do you find that in EMP programs that might not be able to get to root cause, are they sampling more transfer points versus actual harborage areas?
Absolutely. That's probably one of the bigger problems that we have in most of the EMP programs. Yeah. Accessible exposed contact surfaces are transfer points. Any exposed accessible surface accessible for cleaning and sanitation is a transfer point. It should be able to effectively be cleaned and sanitized on your regular basis. So cleaning and sanitizing these after a positive is certainly not preventive action. It is corrective action, but it's not preventive action. We must get to the root cause of the harborage site, and that's where the seek and destroy investigation comes in.
Yeah.
So again, transfer points, any surface between the growth niche or harborage site and the product. Almost all contact surfaces are transfer points, not growth niches. So these are interim or temporary locations where the organism can be found by the verification sampling as it is en route to a contact surface of the product. And I say, it's only going to two places. It's either going to the product or down the drain.
Right. Yeah.
So on the other hand, process control sampling provides a method to let data drive the system. Process control indicator sites located at equipment and facility design risk enable that early warning of potential problems before we have a food safety risk. So it enables us to know and measure problem areas, then take action, and we call that the predictive state. Now, this leads us to three fundamental types of sampling. We have verification sampling, process control sampling, and investigative sampling. Again, verification is product, zone 1 contact surfaces, and zone 2 and 3 transfer pathways and vectors. Process control indicator sites are again the facility and equipment sanitary design concern. Zone 4 to zone 3 transfer pathways. Those are hurdles we must implement.
Right.
And effectiveness of hygienic zoning. We have investigative sampling, and there's two types. For cause, which is sampling after a verification positive.
Okay. Yeah.
For cause investigative sampling is part of your verification program. You get a verification positive, you must do for cause sampling. And you got to do that before you clean and sanitize and destroy all the evidence.
Yeah.
That seems like a really important point to make sure is well understood.
Right. Because I would say the first thing people do, right? We found a positive, let's clean.
Yes.
Right. But you miss out on key information if you do that.
Yeah, my lawyer friends call that destruction of evidence. So we also have not-for-cause investigative sampling, which is really for purposes of process control.
Okay. Well, I would think that naturally I would hope people are familiar with the for cause investigation, right? Because that would be part of the program. But can you tell us a little bit more about the not for cause? Like, why would we do that? Like, what triggers that? What's the benefit of doing not for cause investigation sampling?
Well, an example of not for cause investigations are samples taken to find a new growth niche, samples taken to find a new transfer vector or pathway, samples taken to establish or qualify a hurdle or barrier system.
Okay.
Samples taken to establish a monitoring procedure or process. Samples taken to assess or characterize a risk or control procedure or part of a facility or process change. These can be triggered also by a zone 3 or zone 4 indicator site positive. So these indicator sites are strategically located in close proximity to a known growth niche, barrier, or hurdle. So movement of the organism from the indicator site through verification site or area would then be required before violation of food safety. So these indicator sites then over time will measure the strength of the barrier or hurdle or the effectiveness of the management of growth niches. Seek and destroy investigations on a new piece of equipment to develop sanitation methods and identify potential areas of risk. Again, all of these are examples of things that we don't necessarily need to share with the agency or an auditor. These are what we use to develop those preventive controls. Investigation on a piece of equipment that's been in operation without any linked verification positives. We do that. Martin Wakeman and I view this as validation of the pathogen control process. So the purpose of this investigation then is to measure effectiveness of the sanitation methods below the normal level of disassembly. So seek and destroy can also define the normal and periodic deep level of disassembly required. So investigative sampling can identify optimal locations for the placement of indicator sites in either zone 3 or zone 4. It enables us to measure risk in the zone 4 area.
Yeah. So I think like as you are the people that are listening out there, and as you think about building your EMP program, having those pieces, right? The verification, the process control, and the investigative, either for cause or not for cause, is so important to your EMP program.
So this means preventive control sampling will yield positive findings.
Mm.
Listeria and salmonella control factors become known and manageable to the team. Sampling now is biased towards indicator sites that monitor the effectiveness of the controls in place.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as we go through this, you can see how it teaches the team where to look for risk. Risk, again, are typically associated with sanitary design issues or barriers of movement. So sampling then is used to assess those risks with the process or infrastructure changes.
Mm-hmm.
Positives now can be celebrated because our control can be established before findings become picked up or get a part of the verification monitoring or become in a pathway of movement.
Mm-hmm.
So, in essence, preventive seek and destroy missions validate the robustness of the control system with focus to eradicate persistent strains and mitigate their impact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love the structure too around positives, right? I think if you're going out and swabbing and you don't have the right processes in place, right, then I feel like that's when people almost, for lack of a better word, like flustered or don't know what to do next, right? But like if you, exactly what you're saying, if you build those pieces around it, then positive looks like a success, especially if you're going out and trying to find them so they're not a part of that verification, you know, monthly routine, quarterly routine that you're going through.
We must remember what Frank Yanis has told us. The goal of food safety professionals should be to create a food safety culture, not a food safety program.
Yes.
So the S&D process enables us the creation of that strong food safety culture. It builds trust.
It does. It does. But, you know, we definitely know that when we talk about, well, let's go investigate, not everybody gets as enthusiastic as we do to be like, let's go sample in this other area, this not for cause investigation. And I think I don't know if this maybe even relates to Neil's question, but like how do you write these into, let's see, Neil's question is like, how do you write it into your program? Is it like adding to your validation program, or like he even says, how does this information transpire to regulatory? Because I think those are some of the fears that hold people back from saying, let's jump in and actually seek so we can destroy.
Yeah.
Well, let's look at it real clearly. If I come to your plant as a customer, as a regulator, as an auditor, and I ask you, show me your ability to effectively produce safe product, what are you going to share with me? You're going to share your verification program.
Mm-hmm.
Verification is the effective measure of how well you're doing your process controls. You're not going to show me your process control data. You're going to show me verification data, which verifies the effectiveness. Now, like any good negotiation, you've got that data in your hip pocket. So if the questions become intense, then you can reach out and start pulling that data out. However, we have to recognize the verification data must show closure to any positive found in verification. That's not for cause investigation. Finding that harborage site or growth niche and then verifying that you've effectively eliminated or have developed a management system to manage that.
Yeah.
And that management system, I like to think of as preventive controls.
I think you're touching in the piece of destroy, right? Like that's that whole closing of the cycle, right? Where you have to show that you closed it out, that it's no longer a problem anymore, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So even when we think like about the whole program, like what are the keys to success with seek and destroy process?
Well, I think the first one, and we look back in time, and I ask myself, why have I been successful? And ladies and gentlemen, it was not what I did. It was the formal, chartered, cross-functional team that we created. You should I like to call them S&D teams, seek and destroy teams. They can be food safety, you can call them whatever you want. But anyhow, no one person or department can do it alone.
Yeah.
Food safety management should focus on the team agenda. We can't let too many projects bog the team down. We have to catalyze the energy. I hope you like that word, catalyze.
We do.
We have to catalyze that energy created by the team, because success truly breeds success.
Yeah.
So it puts us in that cheerleading position, et cetera, et cetera. The nice thing about this process is data driven. We're not listening or not acting on the loudest voice in the room. Show me your data. Show me your data. That has to be a mantra. We ask questions like, what problem are you really trying to solve here? So food safety management then is responsible and accountable for quick, accurate data analysis. I see so many times they're overwhelmed with doing all the work. They don't get a chance to analyze the data, which provides direction.
Yeah.
So the other thing is, and I'm really hung up on this one. Corrective action is directed to the immediate concern at hand. Preventive action changes the process. Don't confuse the two.
Yeah, that's big. Is this one of the hurdles that you see organizations having a hard time getting over?
Absolutely. If you spend time going through CAPA programs and look at the results of the CAPA programs, you find the problems repeating themselves over and over again. We're going to train the people. That's our corrective and preventive action. Well,
Yes.
that doesn't work. The key here is you have to change the process. It's a procedural change, or if not, firefighting will continue to rule.
Absolutely. I mean, we think about that too. I mean, if you watch us, right, you know that the corrective action, right, writing and training, or
my favorite is we'll do more sampling. Like,
no,
let's add more cost to the problem we already created that we don't know what caused it.
Exactly. Like there has to be a true change on how you get work done. And that's process change. That's people, right? Like how are you leading differently? How are you influencing differently? Where that's when you see that true change, that true really culture, right? Like it ultimately comes down to culture and training. It's a piece of it. We have to have our training programs, right? But that we know, because we've been doing training for a really long time, that that's not going to really push your food safety culture forward, or even in this case, pieces of your food safety culture where we talk about EMP, riding in the training line, we will train, we will retrain. It's not going to solve it.
Well, one of the keys to success that we found in the whole seek and destroy process is engagement of the workforce in planning and implementing change.
Oh,
You
gosh.
know, the classic one here is if you drop something on the floor of your mother's kitchen, you dang well better pick it up. I don't want you doing that if you're handling product in my processing plant.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of things that we have to do that are not innately intuitive, but part
Yeah.
of the way your mother brought you up.
Yes. That
So,
is such a good point. That's
Mhm.
such a
so
good point. And something that I saw a lot in small businesses, medium-sized businesses, right? Or even people that have new staff coming in that might not have worked in a food facility before, where I've had those conversations. I know you might do this at home, right? And that might be okay for your
yeah,
home life. But these are the risks here. And this is
Yes.
how many people we are impacting here. And this is what happens when that goes wrong, right? And just having those conversations, because I think you're absolutely right. Sometimes that's not the way we were taught to do it.
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah, the why is a pretty important factor
Mhm.
here, and but the nice thing about it, if you implement and execute as we've discussed and as you've discussed, Tia, all those tend to build trust within the organization.
Yeah.
They
And
do.
that's really what it's all about. Now, what we have to recognize is the regulatory program, that verification program, really is a minor percentage of the overall sanitation process control program.
Yeah.
Mm.
Again, the
That-
regulatory program is based on proving control by verification sampling. I do not personally view discovery and measurement of process control elements to be a part of that regulatory program.
Mhm.
So we must then use the system to develop preventive controls to address our known risks. This means finding a positive is a success.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, John, so when you bring that up, because I would imagine there's companies that their EMP program is regulatory based. And
Yeah.
when they think about, gosh, if we want to expand this and we want to strengthen it, that's gonna add cost to our business. And we don't know if we can do that. But we know as food safety professionals, right, we need to understand that risk. We want to improve culture. We also want to be a better business partner. So when you
Yeah.
think about like how would we implement these changes to an EMP program, like how do we do that and drive the food safety maturity that we want while reducing costs, or at least maybe not adding as much cost that prohibits us from being able to move that forward and understand these aspects?
Well, the foundation of this preventive and predictive pathogen program is based on not for cause investigations and indicator sites.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So we're using not for cause investigation to identify those risks and indicators of control. So, properly implemented, these sites should detect problems before verification program positives occur. I'm repeating myself here, but this is such an important concept, and we must separate verification data from process control. You need to have the ability within minutes to print out a year's worth of data of verification and not have any process control in it. That's that's good old database knowledge you have to have.
Mm.
So if a customer auditor asks to see your data for pathogen control, we share that verification data. And this data verifies that the preventive controls are in place. Not for cause investigations triggered by indicator site positives are what we're doing to get to the root cause of harborage sites, or as Sean Stevens, one of my favorite lawyers, likes to say, the root sources.
Hmm.
Now, my friend Martin Waveman also advocates these tools can be used to validate your sanitation process control program. Yeah, that's really a subject for another time. So you asked the question, how does food safety culture fit into this seek and destroy process? I would like to share a slide here if I can figure out how to do it. Let me see if I can do that.
All right. Let's see. All right. We're going to add it in so people can see it. Okay.
So can you see that?
We
Yes.
can see this.
Okay, so many years ago, we developed this maturity model. I really started out with awareness, enlightenment, preventive, and predictive, but Lone Jesperson convinced me to add doubt to it. So organizations in the doubt phase will not act on food safety without external pressure. Minimally sampling. Don't look. You're not trying to find. In the awareness phase, you take corrective action, but do not eliminate the source. We're randomly sampling and finding transfer point positives. Action is driven by regulation or customer just to meet their requirements. That's all we want to do is meet those regulatory requirements. We just want to pass that audit.
Yeah.
Once we reach the enlightened phase, we've now found harborage site or some root sources, but do really not know how to manage or eliminate. We see a lot of transfer point action, and we are classic firefighting. We're solving that same problem over and over again. Now, going from enlightenment to preventive is a huge step.
Yes.
Here, we've eliminated harborage site by redesign or application of an intervention. The classic intervention I like to discuss is we would take our slicers, and we had modified the forklift, and we could pick those slicers up and put them in a smokehouse and cook them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if they were too big to get into a smokehouse, we would cover them with a plastic, tape that down, and inject steam in to cook it. So that's an intervention. It eliminated the organism deep in that equipment. The same thing as using a COP tank to sanitize operator tools and small parts. So what we're doing in the preventive phase is developing methodology to destroy harborage sites, seek and destroy. So we're now systematically removing harborage sites while deploying interventions to control. In the predictive state, we're now using data analytics and indicator sites to drive preventive action before the problem will occur. We're managing growth niches while controlling movement. Preventive action taken before the food safety risk occurs. And as we go through this, we continually reduce risk. Likewise, in all honesty, you reduce sampling costs too, because you're now able to do composite sampling. So the thing I like to have is each of us has that sixth sense. When we walk into a new place, we're doing some assessment, whether it's a department store, a restaurant, an office, or our factory or another factory. Well, we don't do it in our factory. No, that's what we've got to learn how to do. So we need to be able to see the firefighting that's going on.
Yeah.
Once we fine tune that ability, then it will help us fight our desire to do firefighting and develop the interventions and preventive measures that we have to have in those subsequent phases of preventive and predictive.
Yeah.
So you mentioned something on cost reduction. Darn right.
Yeah.
Firefighting, solving the same problem over and over again, only increases cost.
Yeah, it's like a money dump.
Yeah.
Preventive practices and interventions then start enabling us to find problems, eliminate problems, and streamline our system. We're getting variation under control. So preventive practices and intervention for known risk in place, then at the predictive stage, enables us to use something other than pathogen to drive interventions. We can use APC. We can use visual observation. I see we had a problem, apply that intervention. Now, once we get to that stage, we can change our business model. We can incorporate those preventive practices that enable us to have least cost production at a much lower business risk. So we can now take on customers and products that before we were unable to do. And I've seen this make tremendous differences within companies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. John, I love your maturity model around, EMP and thinking about it in that way, because I feel like when you think about food safety culture as a whole, right? Like these stages exist, but the jump between each of them we like to say like that movement is rockier and harder than people think it's going to be. You think, okay, we're in the doubt right now, like no one wants to look. I want to get them to awareness, and that takes different skills. It takes a different skill set to be able to move people from doubt to awareness. And we see it a lot in our business where someone is trying to move an organization to somewhere else, but they really just lack those people skills, those leadership skills, right? To help move their organization, because their organization needs something different than what's happening right now in order for them to see that, we need to be in this awareness state, because they don't know, a lot of times they don't know they're in this doubt phase, right? Like they just know they don't want to do it because of cost, or maybe, the buddies that they know that also makes a product, they don't do it, so the doubters are kind of, friends with one another. And so they can't see why they need to move to another level. And that takes a little bit of like understanding your people.
Well, yeah. And, guys, this is not rocket science. The seek and destroy process, there's 3 pillars of control. First, we eliminate the organism from the exposed product area. Then we control the transfer or movement of the organism. Then we deploy process management techniques. Everything we've talked about is pretty simple. We've got to get rid of the harmful residents. This is accomplished by investigations. Verification, sampling failures, and process control investigations can really help us get there. We have DNA technology now to assist in the identification of residents. I think everybody realizes that these guys can be around for a long time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Are really what we have to make sure that our organization and our food safety staff understand that our greatest fear is a highly pathogenic organism that'll take up residence in our facility. As we move through this process, there's going to be transients. We must prevent residency. That's what all of our sampling is about. So the next thing, we focus on movement of the organism. Think hygienic zoning, barrier walls, controlled movement of people and equipment. I like to say we make these pathways of movement torturous pathways.
I like that.
A child of the 60s, better living through more chemistry, okay? Now, with the managed growth niches, remember, harborage site contains a pathogen or its indicator. Growth niches, by definition, do not have pathogens. So we're really in the business of managing growth niches. We're going to have them. They cannot be eliminated from all of our equipment and facility, but they can be managed. So that's really our key and using predictable measurements to optimize these operational factors. And then we fine tune it, and we continuously improve. So bottom line, deploy process management, eliminate the organism, control transfer, change our business model, make money, make more money.
Make money. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. And I think that's a great summary of what, are like for us to take away today.
Yeah.
There are very definable steps and a process to be able to have more success when it comes to our environmental monitoring programs and meeting business objectives.
Mm-hmm.
They are not dependent. They are things that can happen together.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Awesome. Gosh.
This has been so great. And we are so excited to have you on our show today. And you guys, as we were prepping for the show, we're like, we have so much information, right? So we know you are going to be back with us because like to dive deeper and really understand, right? Like these are the things we should be looking for in our programs, but also like exactly what you talked about where culture is about people. It's not just your programs, right? It's your people, the people that are executing it, the people that are putting meaningful corrective actions, right? And meaningful preventative actions into place is so important. So we thank you for being a part of our show today.
Yes. It's been wonderful having you with us. And I think the other, takeaway that I think about is, John, when you share all of these parts that we do, like having this knowledge is awesome, this technical knowledge and having these skills. But I think what I hear is right, even the best of these, like these programs will fall flat if we don't have effective leadership skills to drive the culture that we want to have.
Yes. Yes.
And so, as we think about this, T and I just put together a preview of our first module of boot camp because people always are curious, like, what is it actually like? And so I'm going to drop that in the link for everybody so that you can go out there and click on it. And if you use the coupon code preview, you'll get to see it in its entirety and why we're so focused on helping technical experts be better technical leaders. So as I'm doing that, yes.
Yeah.
So, any last takeaways?
Anything you want to leave the audience with, John, before we hop off?
In conclusion, the punitive effect of verification-only monitoring creates excessive firefighting. So we must recognize that firefighting that we're creating with the way we designed our measurement system.
Yeah.
It fails to promote that preventive mindset and a strong food safety culture. That's our job, create a culture, as you said. Aggressive sampling can aid in discovering problems before contact surfaces or product engage. I don't think that has been widely practiced and understood as such. So sampling programs can be designed to create a success. I like to say that when we get that positive indicator site, plant manager celebrates and we buys pizza. We want plant managers to buy pizza when we have positives.
I love that.
So preventive practices must precede verification activities. Preventive practices must be measured. And preventive practices must be associated with perceived risk. The data from this drives internal trust. That's my story.
Well, we love it. We love it. Thank you for sharing it with us today.
Thank you very much. It has been wonderful having you on and sharing you with our audience.
Yes. And thank you, audience, for being with us today. We are, like I said, we're here every week. Every week we talk, right?
And next week, we're going to extend celebrating International Women's Day. So be sure to join us. We have a couple of good guests that we'll announce in a couple of days that you will get to come join us and hear about their global experience in food safety and how we continue on this path. So,
we will see you all next week.
So thank you all for being here, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.